Listen, welcome everybody to the Chartered Accountants Worldwide Network USA webinar on corporate social responsibility, a global call to action, featuring our guest speakers, Sulaiman Afzal and Elisa Farri. I'm Shane Rogers, President of the Board of Chartered Accountants Worldwide Network USA, and CEO and founder of Rogers Global Audit Advisors LLC, an internal audit training academy and consultancy. Before we begin, we have some housekeeping announcements. Handouts are available. You can download these from the control panel for the event. This event is CPE eligible if you have requested it. So to qualify, you need to answer the polling questions we will be asking during the webinar. There are 4 polls during the webinar and a survey when you exit. You need to answer at least 3 polling questions to qualify for CPE. The format of this webinar is a 60-minute presentation, including this introduction. If you have questions, please note them in the questions tab on your control panel. We will be recording this presentation and will make it available on our website after editing and approval. As mentioned, at the end of our event, when you exit, you'll take a short survey. So do let us know what you think so we can provide feedback to our presenters. Our learning objectives today. So after the presentation, you should be able to, 1, state a working definition of corporate social responsibility, CSR, and describe it in its 4 pillars. Articulate the fundamental reasons why CSR is an effective organizational strategy for branding and reputational advantage. Explain the 3 primary views of CSR and the explicit and implicit CSR framework. Compare arguments for and against the use of CSR by businesses. 5, identify organizational enemies that hinder sustainability initiatives at scale and present a practical framework to clear the fog on the popular Chief Sustainability Officer role. And 6, implement internal and/or third-party annual CSR reporting. And now let me launch our first poll. And while you're responding, I'll make some introductions to our guest speakers. So hopefully you can see our first poll, which is a question on CSR, whether it's top-down versus bottom-up, which is a more effective approach. So as you are filling that out, I will do some introductions to our presenters. So Elisa Farri. So Elisa is joining us. She's a vice president and co-lead of Capgemini's Invent Management's Lab, a global think tank that bridges the academic and business worlds. The Management Lab originates from the European Center for Strategic Innovation, which was acquired by Capgemini in 2021. Elisa is a frequent contributor to leading management magazines, including the Harvard Business Review, Rotman Management, and Forbes European Business Review. She's also listed in the Thinkers 50 Radar Class of 2023, together with Paolo Servini, co-lead of Capgemini's Invent Management Lab. Previously, Elisa was a researcher at the HBS Europe Research Center in France, where she authored several Harvard Business School case studies. Sulaiman Afzal. Sulaiman has over 30 years of domestic and international experience, ranging from healthcare at AFLAC and BCB SIL, public accounting at KPMG and Ernst & Young, commercial and investment banking experience at the National Commercial Bank and Morgan Stanley, and in the automotive industry at Visteon. Mr. Afzal is based in the US. Mr. Afzal has been involved in US publicly owned corporations, which are subject to the auditing and reporting requirements of the US Sarbanes-Oxley law and also the US Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FCPA, as well as having a lot of experience with corporate social responsibility. And now let me close the poll and we'll reflect on the results. So I'm just sharing the results now, where basically the first section was, the top down was 18%, bottom up was 13%, and 60% was combination of the 2. So hopefully you can see those results. Afzal, I'll ask you if you have any particular perspective on the poll results.
So Shane, you are giving me a chance to give some commentary on this, am I correct?
Correct, Sulaiman.
Yeah, so if I may say, the ideal answer would have been combination, but people who think top down 18% is okay as well, because the policy making comes from the top, and people who thought is 13%, that's okay as well, because you can actually create action. You can facilitate the policy making by making some noise from the bottom. So I think it's a fairly even spread, but we can see 60% feel it's a combination. It's like the same thing as budgeting. You can have budgeting top down or bottom up or a combination. That's my comment, Shane. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Sulaiman. So with that, I'm going to hand over to you, Sulaiman. So I'll control the slides and I'll take myself off camera.
So it's a privilege and honor to be presenting to this global elite audience. We literally have a global audience, obviously in US and Canada. We have some in Europe. We have in some people in Africa and also Asia Pacific. So it's a privilege to be making this presentation because the title of this webinar is a global call for action. So we can see from this first slide that the UN effort, which started in 2015, and last year we were at midpoint, i.e., 2023. And I hope you can see that 15% is where we are on track. 48% moderately or severely off track, and 37% stagnation or regression. So that's the big picture, which is not looking good, but we have another 7 years to catch up, and hopefully we will. And at this point, I have to highlight that in the previous 7 years of this initiative, the requirement for disclosure of the corporate social responsibility was voluntary. In 2024, we will be moving towards mandatory. So this will be addressed a little bit more in detail. So I hope that the move from voluntary to compulsory will actually bring the statistics much better. So this is the big picture. Next slide, please, Shane. So the CSR benefits. Now, the 8 items listed in here are not in sequence of importance. It's just been given a numbering so that during the presentation, we can focus on a particular item. So for example, the number 4 item, contribute to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So we do have a couple of slides further down in the deck which address those 17-point goals, but we are just highlighting in the slide, item number 4, that one of the benefits of participating in corporate social responsibility that we end up contributing to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Item number 5 is also worth a merit. As we move from voluntary to compulsory, we should note that Wellington Management is an example, which is based in Boston. They manage in excess of $1 trillion. And they are becoming, as investors, more mindful on those companies to invest in which are actually contributing to the corporate social responsibility. Another classic example is item number 8, which is addressed again later in the deck, where Tom's, they started about 20 years ago, they make shoes, and they actually are using their brand, which is being enhanced by their contribution towards corporate social responsibility. More on this later in the deck. Thank you. Okay, so this particular slide speaks to itself. CSR is a process for companies to integrate social, governance, environmental into operations and corporate strategy. So this is the whole goal. It should be into the operation and corporate strategy. So we know strategy comes from the top and operations come from the bottom. So we need both. Sustainability has a set of common guidelines which are, contributing towards human rights, environment, working conditions, and business ethics. And I'm in Detroit Automotive, and the supply chain management system is quite important in automotive industry. So to achieve those for any industry, whether it's automotive manufacturing, we would recommend using a self-assessment questionnaire, SAQ. Next slide, please. So this is breaking down the CSR into 3 components: corporate, social, and responsibility. So the key thing is in the first bullet, action that further the social good beyond the interests of the firm and that which is required by law. Now on the question of law, by the way, things are moving in the direction of the law being refined and defined. So it will no longer be a choice for the disclosure, it will be required. So there's a honeymoon period from 2024 to 2026, and past 2026, we will be committed to disclosure. The third bullet in CSR requires consideration of environmental, workplace, community, and philanthropic. And these four components are addressed in more detail in the deck. Thank you. Next slide, please. So these are the four pillars which we addressed in the previous slide. We don't have time to go into all of the items in here, A, B, C, D, but this is like a laundry list. Every company will prepare its own laundry list of things they want to focus on in CSR. So I highlighted four of them in here. I will only talk about one of the four, which is A, employee benefits. Now, I actually personally happen to be passionate about employee benefits. Why? Because 3 years ago, we had COVID, and COVID created a massive challenge on working from home or homeschooling. So one of the things I discovered actually, and I'm practicing this on myself, that I would venture to work for a company which provides an employee benefit, which includes assessment, my own assessment daily of my balanced lifestyle, mind, body, and soul. Again, assessment of my balanced lifestyle, mind, body, and soul. So this comes under the umbrella of wellness. Wellness, globally speaking, is a $7 trillion industry. So we can imagine this is massive. So the audience might go back to the HR and say, hey, do we have a platform where we can evaluate on a daily basis our balanced lifestyle, mind, body, and soul? The rest of the B, C, and D, we can figure that out later on. But unfortunately, we don't have time in this webinar doing it. But next slide, please, Shane. So the pillar number one, environmental responsibility. So environmental, I'll give you an example. When I did my own balanced lifestyle survey questionnaire on myself, I found out that I don't spend enough time in nature. I don't enjoy the moon and and the sun and the stars and the ecology around me. So I took it a point in the summer to go out for walks and enjoy the trees. So once you start enjoying it, by definition, you start to become more conscious. This is just, and I'm telling you, I'm not embarrassed to admit it. I would go from home to the gym, enjoy the gym, come back home, and so on. Now I said, no, I got to go out into the open. So sustainable practices pledging to consider impact of corporate business. And now the third bullet actually is close to my heart. Personally, I feel embarrassed every time I put the plastic into the garbage. I look for ways if I can utilize or put it into the recycling. In Michigan, we do have two separate garbage collection. One is the garbage and the other one is recyclable. So again, some food for thought. Environment is a part of corporate mission. This will come up later in the slide, but this is just, I want to highlight this. So next slide, please, Shane. So culture plays a big role. Everything is about culture. It comes down from the board of directors and comes down to the C-suite, middle management, and the staff level. So it is both top down and bottom up, which was the first poll. So the correct answer, in my opinion, would have been the combination of both. So this kind of highlights it. Next slide, please. So community actually plays a big role. So I live in Detroit, and we have for the past 15 years an annual health seminar where the doctors literally donate their time, and we go in usually on a Saturday and have free evaluation of our health. And there's a hospital which participate, they provide a staff, and literally we have 50 volunteers to service about 500 people who come through the event. I'm giving you a classic example of how community can play a big role. So we have audience from globally speaking. So that might be some food for thought. How can the community play a role in maintaining good health? The fourth bullet we talk a little bit more later on, corporate donation matching. So, example, in Detroit, we have GM, Ford, and Chrysler. So, if you have a favorite charity, and whichever time of the year you make your charitable donation, you need to go and check, is your favorite charity part of the system in with the employer where you work. If they are, and if they do have a corporate donation matching program, your donation literally doubles up. Next slide, please. So this is explaining in more detail how the not-for-profit corporations can philanthropically take the money from the businesses and roll it through the philanthropic effort into the nonprofits. So last year, corporations in the US donated more than 18 billion to non-profit organizations. So we know we have three segments of the economy. We have the government, we have the private sector, and we have the not-for-profit sector. So the not-for-profit sector usually exists not to make money, but to really recycle the money from different sources into the beneficiaries. Next slide, please.
Okay, thank you, Sulaiman. I think we're at polling question number 2. So I'm going to launch the poll, but the question is, does your company publish a CSR sustainability annual report? So give me one moment just to launch the poll, and we'll get your responses. So it's kind of interesting. I guess it might represent a mix, Sulaiman, of the public versus private, perhaps. Will presumably a lot of the larger public companies have a CSR report, but maybe you would comment there. I'm just going to close the poll now. And again, it's 37% yes, 53% no, 9% don't know. Just close the poll and I'll share the results.
So thank you so much, Shane. I'm just going to talk about the 53%, which is no. So unfortunately, the no's will have no choice, especially if they are a large publicly owned company. They will be required by law to provide the annual sustainability report. So there is a honeymoon period this year up to 2026, and we're giving you examples of Walt Disney in here. So this is a classic example that while Walt Disney is a great brand name, if they are smart, which they are clearly, by publishing the annual CSR sustainability report, they are drawing attention that apart from being a fun place, they also contribute towards the corporate social responsibility. So most of us are accountants in this webcast. So I'm having to say that 20 years ago, when Sarbanes-Oxley law came out, we only had one audit report, which used to be on the financial statements. And the Sarbanes-Oxley law changed all that. And by law, for the publicly owned company, they were required to publish a second opinion from the external auditors on the internal controls. So therefore, the point of bringing that case study in is that we are familiar with providing an additional report beyond the balance sheet. So this one is providing an annual report on corporate social responsibility. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Sulaiman, for your perspective there. Let me go to the next slide.
So, like in anything in life, using again Sarbanes-Oxley as an example, we could ask the question like 20 years ago: was Sarbanes-Oxley law a benefit or a burden or both? And there were no right or wrong answer. So similarly, is corporate social responsibility a benefit or a burden or both? And there's no right or wrong answer. But to help you to analyze, dissect it, we put down 3 of each. So what are the benefits, the pros? Strategic use can contribute to a social goal, for example, recycling. So people might use this as an impetus to contribute towards recycling. The second one, the CSR strategy benefits everyone. So these are the stakeholders, and different companies will have different stakeholders. But when we say benefits everyone, basically we're talking about the stakeholders. CSR strategy provides transparency. I hope that that will be the case. But right below that, you can CSR can also unfortunately generate hypocrisy. So hopefully it will be transparency rather than hypocrisy. Costs fall on small businesses or consumer. That is unfortunate because they are the ones who can least afford it, but that's the way it is. And favor on shareholders. So the shareholders actually are the biggest beneficiaries because of the branding benefits, but that's the way it is. But you could treat this as either a pro or a con, either way. Next slide, please. So this is an interesting slide. If you step back and look at the primary views of CSR, so the first view is opportunistic, which focuses that businesses exist to make profit only as a sole source of social responsibility. The second one is a siloed view, socially defined goal rather than a business objective, versus the old CSR that is detached from business, typical philanthropy. The blue one, obviously, is a balanced view, being a good corporate citizen and creating business and economic value versus the profit and purpose view. If I may, actually, I'd like to, because most of us living in the US at least are familiar with Costco. So Costco is a good example of a balanced view. In other words, they look at the stakeholders' perspective. So the first stakeholder are the employees. And generally speaking, the employees working at Costco are very, very happy. And then the next case stakeholder are the suppliers, and suppliers would love to deal with Costco because of their pricing policies. And the third stakeholder is the customer like you and I. And we benefit because their pricing is very attractive and they have a very good return policy. I'm just giving you an example of a balanced view from a business perspective. Thanks, Shane. Next slide, please. Now, this is an interesting slide which people may have different view. So, for example, this is Warren Buffett saying, if you are in the luckiest of 1% of humanity, you owe it to the rest of humanity to think about the other 99%, said Warren Buffett. Another example I can give you is Bill Gates, his wife Melinda. She actually, contributes most of her wealth towards the 99%. I think her focus appears to be towards Africa, but there are other parts of the world we can also provide benefit to the other 99% of the population, including, by the way, the US. So we did over the weekend within the family gathering an example. So if one of the richest men in the world, I'm not going to name the person, but if one of those richest person in the world gave away 200 billion 200 billion, there will be no homeless people in the US. And that person is probably approaching a trillion in wealth. So giving away 200 billion to eliminate all homeless people is definitely a item on the wish list. So purpose of any business is not only to make a profit, but also to be responsible for its actions and decisions. So business people must review their impact of decisions and action on the different sectors of the society. So you can see in the picture, moral, honor, ethics, values, and so on and so on. Okay, thanks, Shane. Let's go to the next slide, please. So I would recommend Elisa chips. Yep.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
This is Elisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Sulaiman. So, what we have understood so far is that sustainability is ranking very, very high on almost, let's say, every business man or every CEO agenda today. And the point is, if sustainability and CSR are the priority, why is it so difficult to achieve them at scale? So, to answer this question, my team and I investigated the potential root causes. And what we found is that the enemy is inside every single organization. Why? Because simply companies are not designed to be managed, organized, and function with sustainability in mind. Inside every organization, think about 4 antibodies, which are illustrated on this slide. And by the way, they are typical of complex transformation. So keep in mind that we have been here before. The first enemy is about structure and governance. For too long, let's be honest, sustainability was just put in a corner. Very marginal role, limited resources, limited relevance, kept very, very distant from other corporate functions, other business units. Today, sustainability labels, sustainability, let's say job titles, are mushrooming in the organizations, reinforcing the fact that sustainability is a very hot topic. But this leads to an increasing confusion if such roles are not well defined. Let's think about different ways of working, different reporting lines, in some cases even overlapping tasks. People saying, this is my job, that's your job. And so this creates fog, this creates uncertainty. And also from a governance standpoint, in few organizations, we're seeing a structured approach to orchestrating the various initiatives. And so this is one of the big internal enemies to sustainability. The second one is about culture and leadership. Most of today's managers were educated at business schools and they built their career with a profit-only paradigm. And this brings us back to what we just discussed with Sulaiman. And the point is that today, this is not true anymore. And this was highlighted also by the survey, by the poll results about the balanced view, okay? And let's now try to put ourselves in the shoes of senior executives. Radically changing a profit-only mindset is not easy. Is putting them out of the comfort zone. It's a big change, it's a big jump. And so what they typically do, they take a shortcut. And so they simply change the narrative. But they do not align systematically and organically also the way in which they behave and they make decisions. And this brings us to the third enemy, which is about processes and metrics. Such rules were all designed in a pre-sustainability era. And so these are the lenses at which we should be looking at these processes and KPIs. In the past, all that mattered was profit. Let's be honest, people, planet, they were not even on the radar screen when making a decision. And so projects got killed if they didn't make the financial threshold. And other impacts, they were not even discussed or debated. And so if we keep having this profit first mindset coupled with this toolkit and these rules, well, the risk that sustainability initiatives might get killed by bureaucracy is very, very high. And now let's jump to the last enemy, which is about methods and skills. In most organizations, what we are seeing is that people are lacking the knowledge, the experience. They're not equipped with the right tools when it comes to sustainability. Very, very few are also familiar with the terminology, with the acronyms, with the regulations, with the frameworks. And as we have seen in the recent past with complex transformation, let's think of the digital wave. If you couple the knowledge gap with intrinsic complexity, well, this will definitely hinder sustainability efforts at the scale. Now, let's go to the next page, please. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Shane. Next slide. How to defeat them. How to defeat them. Thank you. So now that we are clear on the enemies, the question is about how to defeat them. So how can we unleash the full potential of becoming a truly sustainable company? To answer this question, what we did with my team was to look for analogies and common patterns, with other waves of complex transformation. As I said at the beginning, we have been here before. So what can we learn from the past in order to tackle these challenges? And so let's start from the enemy number one, structure and governance. It's imperative to clarify new roles and accountabilities now. It's imperative to design structures that can allow sustainability to percolate inside the organizations. Enemy number two, it's imperative to build and nurture a culture at all levels, starting from the top, from the leadership, that fosters sustainability-driven behaviors. We need leaders who walk the talk in a credible way with all stakeholders. And this is very, very important. Leaders can't be credible if they walk the talk internally with employees and not externally with the suppliers and the partners and the customers and vice versa. And so we need such homogeneous behavioral map in order to ensure that values of sustainability and CSR are translated into day-to-day actions. And then the third enemy, how can we defeat this? Well, it's easy to understand. We need to embed sustainability into the decision-making process. We need to change, especially the metrics. We are seeing more and more organizations that they keep more or less the same processes, but at the same time, what they do, they adjust the metrics. Sustainability can't be one of the KPIs at the end of the innovation process or a tick the box in the fuzzy front end of the innovation funnel. It has to be embedded into the deep reflections about where the value lies, what could be the impact beyond the profit of a specific project, of a specific initiative, of a specific new venture. And the last enemy, which is about methods and skills. The way in which we can defeat is through knowledge. We need to upskill, to build an internal capability. It's time to update the traditional toolkit, to equip people with the knowledge and the expertise that they need in order to translate values into their work. And this isn't a responsibility of the entire workforce at all levels. Too often in the past, I heard, oh, but this is a training that we're doing for the reporting team. You know, they're reporting on ESG, and so I'm building this capability. Yes, but what about the others? Also, think about the taxonomy, the language. You need people to speak the same language. So it's worth the investment of time and effort to build this capability. Now you might ask yourself, okay, Elisa, this resonates, but now if I look at this list, from where to start? Because it's obviously complex to defeat all of them at once. So based on best practices that we've been analyzing over the last 2 years, my answer would be start from the structure and the governance. Why? Because you need to create an alignment, a clear alignment and sound alignment about what the leader of sustainability, which recently is called the Chief Sustainability Officer, should play. Okay, so and on this, if we go to the next slide, I would like to deep dive on this aspect. Why I'm taking this under the spotlight? Because when you introduce a novel role into an organization, which can be small, medium, large, no matter the size, it's fair, to be honest, that you might lack a bit of clarity, okay? Especially if it's a completely new role. Think about the early days of the Chief Innovation Officer or the early days of the Chief Digital Officer. And now we're, hearing about the Chief Artificial Intelligence Officers. For all these roles, for which, a solution, a model, a template do not exist yet, it's normal to find, fragmentation, lack of clarity. You're still in an experimentation mood when you inject some organizational changes. So the question is, what should the leader of sustainability, in this case, the chief sustainability officer, do today in order to drive sustainability initiatives at scale? So instead of looking at this role from a general abstract level, what we did, we translated this into 8 common tasks that we systematically found when we interacted, worked with, analyzed companies globally. And we captured these 8 tasks in a simple visual framework. Very, very simple. You can see on this page the spider web. On the left-hand side, you see the previous version, what was called the AZs, and on the right-hand side, you see the new spider web. This is the example from an experience with a German manufacturer. In this case, what happened? The executive team realized in a series of conversations that we had that they were lacking the focus and the alignment, on the what and the why of the chief sustainability officer role. And so we encourage them, to clear a bit the ambiguity and to use this very simple tool in an executive workshop setting before discussing and debating about organizational directives, organizational detailed design, and so on. So we said, guys, wait. First of all, let's do the exercise. Let's discuss internally, and then you can translate this into a policy and detailed organizational design framework. And so plotting the 8 tasks as you're seeing them, especially on the left-hand side, shed light on the actual coverage of the responsibility. So as you can see, only few of these tasks were performed by the chief sustainability officer. And so it was, as a visual tool, as you can imagine, immediately clear, that this was unbalanced, that there were some gaps. And so it unlocked fruitful discussion and debates at the executive team level about how to move to a more balanced view. So what to cover, how to cover, and who to cover. Because this is the other point. The message of the spider web is that the chief sustainability officer, so the person, the team leading CSR and sustainability, should be the orchestrator, should make sure that the overall strategy is holistic. But then this does not mean that you have one person, one team executing on all the tasks. Then the second step is to allocate responsibility and accountabilities for the execution. Obviously, leadership has a crucial role to play. I wanted to share with you this example because too often we hear top leaders, executives blame, let me use this very tough word, blame the people, if sustainability is not embedded into the organization. I would like to rebalance a bit and put under the spotlight the responsibility of leadership team who are playing a crucial role in successfully executing the company sustainability agenda. So clearing the fog should rank very, very high on their to-do list. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Elisa. So let me just get to the next slide. So we are at poll number 3. So just the question is your most recent CSO report assured by internal audit and or a third party? So just give me one moment to launch the poll, please. Okay, hopefully it's launched now. So I'm going to close the poll now and we'll share the results and then we'll briefly talk about them. Share the results. So the results are 18% yes, 18% no, 23%, I think 23%, 41% on the CSO report. Okay, so yeah, an interesting poll result. Sulaiman, any particular perspective on that one?
I think this is a very interesting polling result, Shane. So I would like to comment on the we do not have a CSR report, which was, I think, 41%. And like I said, most of the audience are probably with accounting background. So if we take us back to the Sarbanes-Oxley time, there used to be only one audit report. And then the Sarbanes-Oxley law, by mandate, required publicly owned companies to issue a second opinion. And that's why the COSO cube is in the bottom left-hand corner. So for those people who are career-minded, when Sarbanes-Oxley came out 20 years ago, a lot of us built, including myself, a complete career with Sarbanes-Oxley law, if you like. So again, this is a second bubble coming up. So people who are career minded, like Elisa said, chief sustainability auditor role, excuse me, chief sustainability officer role, CSO role, or indeed the chief audit executive role can be rebundled now. So I think, interesting, Shane, the polling results, it gives us some food for thought. And for those people who are career minded, I think they have an opportunity here. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Sulaiman. Let me move to the next slide.
So I'm going to go through relatively quickly to this slide because Elisa has done a great job in explaining the benefits and the challenges both. The only thing I will add is the last box on the right hand side. Through attracting talent, CSR can help build organizational reputation. So it's all about recruitment. You recruit the right talent, you build the right talent, and then hopefully the benefit of CSR and branding and reputation will be self-explanatory. Next slide, please. So these are home brands. The first two are clearly home brands, Levi's and Starbucks. Those speak for themselves. I like to focus on the third brand, which a lot of us may not have heard of, which is the Tom's shoes. This started like 20 years ago. So the founder went to Argentina and found his motive to establish the company, which was utilizing the shoes which were used in Argentina. But unfortunately, they were giving away initially one shoe for every shoe sold. Needless to say, the American Shoe Association came up in arms because they were losing the market share, and Tom's went bankrupt. Now they came up again. Now they're no longer giving away one free shoe for one sold. They're actually giving away one third of their profits. And this is a comment from Amy Smith. Let's break this down. We want to do more to have an even greater impact. The journey to impacting another 100 million lives has officially begun. Let's throw on our Tom and let's keep moving forward. And she's being very humble, with gratitude. On the right hand side, she's making another point, which is unfortunately globally the big challenge, which is mental illnesses, which impact all of us probably in the webinar. Either have a family member or know somebody who has a mental problem. So this is an example how you help the society by giving away one third of your profits. So just check this one out. You can learn more about it. You can download their annual report and learn from that. For those people who do not have a CSR report, this will give you guys some food for thought. Next slide, please. Now, this is the overview of the 17-point agenda of the UN 2030 Charter for Sustainable Development. Now, everybody will have their favorites. So I will tell you my favorite, which is the top row, which is for every person on the planet, no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, which fortunately in the US and Canada is very, very good. But unfortunately, in some parts of the world, like Africa and Asia, it still needs a lot of work. And clean water and sanitation. You guys will be shocked to know I live in Detroit, one of the cities close to Detroit, Flint. They literally had a problem with clean water because of the lead poisoning. So it can happen in the most advanced economies in the world. So you can pick your favorite out of the 17, but you need to pick something. In other words, what I'm saying is straightforwardly, no selection is not an option. You got to select a few. You cannot embrace all 17 of them in one go, but my favorite is the top row. Next slide, please. No, previous slide. Yeah, so this actually is a very interesting slide. It's a very busy slide, so I will not spend too much time on it. But all of us recall 20 years ago when Sarbanes-Oxley law came out. And as we know, the law is written by lawyers and accountants. So when it came to implementing the Sarbanes-Oxley law, the big four accounting firms in the US went to the SEC and they said, can we utilize the 1992 COSO framework to provide an opinion on the internal controls? And the SEC gave them a nod and a wink. So fast forward from 1992, they updated the COSO framework, which was called the COSO 2013 framework. So I'm just want to give you a background to the two pictures on the slide. So the left-hand side is the UN 17 Sustainable Goals. On the right-hand side is the COSO 2013 framework. And most of us are accountants, so we can see the 17-point agenda of the UN, and COSO 2013 framework has 17 principles. So if we remember the word 17, 17. And now the work comes in. How do we do the gap analysis in meeting the target of 17-point UN agenda and complying with the 17 principles of the COSO framework? So to make it life easy, I've actually put down the 7 items to do the gap analysis. This is not in any kind of sequence. The point I'm making is just pick 2 of them. The number 4, making changes to improve data quality. Now guess what? We accountants, unfortunately, and I'm happy to admit, all my working life, I focus on structured data. Why? Because it ends up in the general ledger. But the Gartner research shows 80% of the data is unstructured. Things like emails and memos and notes and so on, minutes of meeting, those are unstructured data which do not end up in the general ledger. That's what we should be looking at to improve the quality of the data. The slide number 5 is a little bit of a technical perspective on the 2013 COSO framework. We all have entity level control, which are top down, which are things like ethics policy, the audit committee charter, internal audit charter, policies and procedures, entity level control. Then we have where the music starts, activity level control. So we need to focus on both. And then the last item is the assurance, internal audit, and the third party. And I want to highlight the bar at the bottom of the slide. I'll read it for word by word because it's very important. Assurance plays a vital role in the corporate reporting landscape, and a new global baseline for assurance of sustainability reporting should be available by the end of the year. Now, this is a whole topic which can be another complete webinar, which we might do later on in the year, on what are the changes which are coming. They're out there. At a high level, I'd say Europe is more advanced than the US, unfortunately. But the US, SEC is stepping in, and the minute SEC steps in, music will start. Thanks very much, Shane. I'll get back to you.
Great, thanks, Sulaiman. Let me just go. In fact, before we go to the next slide, I would probably just also add, it's a call to action for internal auditors as well, as you sort of pointed out with the sort of point number 7. Now, internal auditors should absolutely, they cover all the key risks of the organization, not just financial and operational risks, but all key risks, including non-financial risks tied to, sustainability frameworks and CSR. So it's important, these topics are important to all organizations, and internal audit should be rolling up its sleeves. Obviously has great internal knowledge of corporations, of the organizations they work for, and really help management implement frameworks, feedback on the frameworks, ensure that they're sort of designed and operationally effective, and even help out, with sort of gap analysis and making sure that the approach is robust and is sustainable in its own right. So yeah, just very interesting perspective that you shared, Sulaiman. Let me share the next slide, which is the next poll. For wealth redistribution, which is the most effective? Government sector, private sector, not-for-profit, or individual direct contributions? So just give me one moment to launch the poll for you. Okay, hopefully I've launched the poll. and yeah, let's see what comes back. I know, Sulaiman, you and me have probably fairly similar views on this from our prior discussions, but it'll be interesting to see where the participants come out. Okay, so the results basically: government sector 37, private sector 21, not-for-profit 19%, individual direct 23. So kind of fairly well distributed, Sulaiman. I don't know if you have any particular perspective on this one.
I do definitely, and interestingly, the audience went in favor of the government sector, and the just to bring to highlight what does wealth redistribution mean. So when we have any kind of a taxation system, basically the goal is wealth redistribution. So we all know that debt and taxation are two certainties in life. So interestingly, people are moving towards 37% government sector. That brings into question the efficiency or the inefficiency of the government to redistribute the wealth. The other question is what's called the principles of taxation. So in the US, the primary taxation system is income tax, but there are parts of the world I can tell you which actually the taxation system is on net wealth and not income. Now, the main comment I have is, and that's what Shane said, he and I talked earlier on, both of us felt that for the most effective redistribution of wealth is this choice number D, individual direct contribution. So what do we mean by that? I personally am passionate about supporting orphans. So I do that once a year, and God Almighty has blessed me with the vision to support, for example, 15 orphans every year. So I selected my favorite charitable organization, which has minimal overheads, and I get a monthly report on those 15 orphans, on their educational needs, on their health needs, on their clothing needs, and their housing needs. The point I'm making is that for the wealth redistribution system to work, we have to be philanthropic. Now, what does philanthropy mean? The three T's: time, using your time, your talent, or treasure for common good. So I leave this thought for you guys. Everybody thinks differently. There's a book on the left-hand side of the poll slide, which you can consider purchasing. So Shane, this is my submission, and I hand it back to you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sulaiman. So I think we're at the Q&A part of the webinar. I don't see any questions that have come in. I was looking at the questions tab, but I think we've time for one question before we close. And maybe I'll ask the question to Elisa. So Elisa, how can artificial intelligence revolutionize corporate social responsibility? Would you give us some perspective on that?
Well, I have some good news to you and all the participants. So AI, and in particular, generative AI, is already having a big impact on your work. There are more and more cases and successful stories of organizations that are embedding these technologies into their own workflows and office tools to support in advanced data analysis and reporting. We all know that there is an inherent complexity in ESG reporting, and this technology can help you analyze data, simulate scenarios, visualize data, and also automate some of the reporting. And the NASDAQ, for instance, is a case in point. I invite you to investigate what NASDAQ, for instance, is doing with the automation of ESG-related data analysis. They engage with various stakeholders through an AI-driven chatbot, in other words, a virtual assistant. And this can free up a lot of time, a lot of energies, and also for your daily work. This means that most tasks that can be automated can be done by the machine, but never trust it 100%. and the rest of your energies can be invested in much higher added value tasks. Personally, I feel that what we're seeing so far is just scratching the surface. We published a recent report. I use the we, but it was not directly my team, it was our research institute. And the report is called the Eco-Digital Era. And they delve in depth into the digital economy and how it can provide not only benefits to the business, which is a given, we all see that, but also significant environmental and social value. And when we look at the numbers in this report, we see that digital technologies like AI, generative AI, will contribute more than 1/5 and up to 1/3 of the GHG emission reduction. This threshold is the one required by the Paris Agreement by 2030. And this confirms that the potential is there and that they can play an important role to drive sustainability transformation.
Great. Wow, that's terrific perspective, Elisa. Thank you so much for sharing. Just in the interest of time, I think we're pretty much at the end of our webinar. I don't think we have time for another question without going over time. Well, I would like to say thank you to Elisa and to Sulaiman, our great presenters today, for this webinar, for sharing their fabulous perspective on this topic. Just remind everyone again, it is a global call to action. So when you get back to your organizations, don't be afraid to start looking under the hood and start asking all sorts of questions about CSR and the framework. If you need any particular help from a consulting perspective, trying to do some of that gap analysis that was certainly well flagged at the end, feel free to reach out to myself or Sulaiman. We'd be more than happy to help engage on that topic. Finally, just a couple of other topics to mention. We don't know what our next webinar will be, but please keep a look at the website. There'll be more updates. And please take the chance, if you can, to fill out some survey feedback as you leave this webinar. And please feel free to share your perspective. We really appreciate hearing your voices and sharing and gathering your feedback so we can reflect on it. So thanks again. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And again, thanks again to Sulaiman and Elisa. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Shane. Thank you, Sulaiman. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.